things about this and how it is available to so many people from all around the world. With this round, us having a European player playing against a South American player. We have Paulo Vitor Damo Rosa on the Team of Reclamation we've come to expect versus Michael Bonde on Rakdos Sacrifice, back for more anti-growth spiral aggression.
Breeding Pool versus Blood Crypt, a classic matchup since the original Ravagor block, and here again in this standard format. Michael Bonde sending back a 7 very quickly, looking at a much better 6 here, thinking what he is going to be putting back. And then Paulo Vitor Damo Rosa on Team Reclamation with a somewhat clunky hand that's not really that well suited to this matchup here.
This is the kind of hand I would imagine we see a mulligan from. This is something where Nightpack Ambusher is that good, but so many of your lands come into play tapped.
Right, and even if you were to draw, let's say, the turn to Growth Spiral, you can't really leverage that in a timely fashion. It's hard for this hand to really improve that dramatically. We do see Paulo keep here, though. Draws a second copy of Expansion Explosion, which the first one is already a long way away, so the second one not doing too much for him just yet.
And I imagine the reason we see this keep from Paulo is because that Reclamation into Ambusher into Big Explosion kind of wombo combo is the way that you can actually kind of race with the slower draws from this Rakdos Sacrifice deck are going to present.
But this is not one of those slower draws, then, where we see Gutterbones into Dreadhorde Butcher, the perfect aggressive curve out for the Rakdos Sacrifice deck. And what usually makes this matchup good for Team of Reclamation is those draws are not that frequent. You don't have to face those down too often. Paulo does have to face against it in this game, and with a hand that is really not equipped to do it.
Yeah, this Dreadhorde Butcher is one of the cards that's just so amazing at getting out of control earlier. It reminds me of Slith Firewalker back in original Mirrodin Standard. When that card got out of control, you knew something had gone wrong, because that meant someone who already was ahead had a card that scaled out of control.
And what must Bonde think is going on Paulo's side, where he keeps a 7-card hand, no plays thus far in this game?
I imagine if you're on Bonde, you're kind of expecting Paulo to just have some combination of cards that's leaning on that Wilderness Reclamation to just absolutely leap to the later stages of the game in terms of mana development.
You might assume that he'd have a copy of something like Storm's Wrath to catch him back up in one fell swoop, but again, Paulo does not have those in his main deck, or indeed in his 75. So Bonde knows that he can keep applying pressure without having to worry about that.
Right, this is the kind of spot where Paulo has a pile of Mystical Disputes and Aether Gusts for different matchups. This main deck negate is kind of just rotting in hand. This is not something that Paulo really wanted to play against. In game one, his deck's just not equipped to fight on this axis.
And that Priest of Forgotten Gods, excellent at containing Nightpack Ambusher, which is one card that could really help Paulo stabilize this game. And that Priest this turn is going to fuel a Worst Rider and a Cauldron Familiar, rebuilding that board. And yeah, Paulo's going to pack it in before even playing the Reclamation.
Yeah, that was a classic no spells die draw from Team of Reclamation that these Rakdos Sacrifice decks love to see.
And Paulo will attempt to play at least one spell, I imagine, in these post-sideboard games. You see Scorching Dragonfire going to be a good pickup for him there in sideboarding. He also has a Scavenging Ooze that could do some good work. Elder Gargoth we see jump into the deck. The fourth copy of Nightpack Ambusher there as well. And you see him once again de-emphasizing this Reclamation Expansion Explosion package.
Right, a lot of what we're seeing here is something similar to what we saw from Ari Lax in the later rounds of yesterday's final championship qualifier leading into today, where rather than going into something like Storm's Wrath, we're seeing an incredibly robust, we'll just say, group of these lean removal spells that are able to interact in the early turns and can even combo with the expansion half of Expansion Explosion to build multiple removal spells, multiple points of interaction in the same turn.
And you see for Bonde, doubling down on the aggression, switching out one free dot for another, 4 copies of Rotting Regisaur jumping into the deck there. A card that you play down on turn 3, that is a substantial clock by itself, in conjunction with anything else. That can lead to some turn 5 kills, which are what you really need in this matchup.
And something I want to point out about Bonde's sideboard plan, look at the number of red cards. He is working to absolutely blank copies of Aether Gust and just strand those in Paulo's hand in the early stages. Dreadhorde Butcher, fully aware this card is just not going to be as good on the draw, so not having that upside, as well as having the downside of turning on those situational blanks like Aether Gust, is just not worth it, and something that Bonde is going to opt out of going into this game too.
That's a very good point. Bonde has seen the list. It's an open deck list tournament. He knows Paolo has 3 Aether Gusts in the main deck, 1 more on the sideboard, and blanking that card could be a big deal here. And a very creature-heavy draw for Paolo. Scavenging Ooze, Uro, and Bonecrusher Giant. And we'll lump in Shark Typhoon in there too. Why not?
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is a Scorching Dragonfire and a gang of creatures.
Joined by a Growth Spiral, but no third land yet to put in with that for Paolo, who will be hoping to spike that off the Growth Spiral. And his Agonizing Remorse has to fire off the Spiral now. Can't let that one get taken.
Ooh,
and just draws another 4-drop.
Land.
And looking at the texture of Paolo's hand, you see why Reclamation is often shaved in sideboarding in this matchup, where you have these sorcery speed threats, and it does pair well with that Shark Typhoon. But you just think if that Reclamation was really any other card, it might be better at performing something that Paolo needs in this game.
And now, this Agonizing Remorse is almost doing that 1-2 punch we saw in Mono Black Devotion Standard, where you'd have a Thoughtseize into a Pack Rat that you could just ride to victory on its own. This is the new version of Agonizing Remorse into Rotting Regisaur that will slam the door so quickly, especially when Paulo's priced into playing as painful a mana base as he is to support 3 colors of spells.
Depending on who you ask. But this Agonizing Remorse, there's no obvious hole to really pick in Paolo's hand. He has the 2 removal spells. He has the payoff cards if the game goes longer. So there's not, if Bonde was able to snipe that Growth Spiral, that would be perfect. As it is, this is actually a tough choice. Goes with the Bonecrusher Giant. Paolo does draw that 3rd land, now gets to cycle Uro in search of a 4th. And look at this, with Paolo on the play, Bonde just playing that Remorse on turn 2. Nothing's happened yet. Rotting Regisaur will be his first play of impacting the board. That's a good one. But look at this. Castle Locthwain just having to enter the battlefield tapped?
Oh, that's so brutal for Bonde here, because now your first creature coming down after Wilderness Reclamation is a recipe for disaster if you're in Bonde's seat.
There is Rotting Regisaur, but turn 4 on the draw for Bonde. It's not where you want that. And this is where you see the mana issues that are commonly spoken of with the Ragnar Sacrifice deck. I think if that deck had perfect mana, maybe another untapped dual land, that deck would be a lot more popular than it is, because when it works, it's very impressive, but too often you just get some games like this.
And this Brazen Borrower that we're seeing picked up by Paolo is such a good answer to this Rotting Regisaur. We might see something similar to what we saw from Autumn Burchett in the earlier stages of our tournament series, where they would just let a Rotting Regisaur stay in play for a minute. Just play with their life total, use it as a resource in order to shred the opponent's resources.
And there is a juicy Claim the Firstborn target in Scavenging Ooze to go along with the Witch's Oven in Bonde's hand. He also does have the Noxious Grasp, which could take down the Ooze instead, so maybe you could eat the Shark as well.
And you can see Bonde looking at discarding this Call of the Death Dweller, saying, all right, there's a Scavenging Ooze. Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
And there is a 4th land. So now I'm keen to see if Bonde tries to set up some kind of combination of plays before combat, or if he attacks with the Rotting Regisaur, intending to just replay it if Paolo tries to bounce it with Petty Theft. And here we go, Claim the Firstborn on Scavenging Ooze. That one switches sides. Those will crunch into the red zone. And I wonder if there's even a case for Petty Theft on your own Scavenging Ooze now that Bonde hasn't deployed that Sacrifice outlet yet.
I also really like just trying to do something like that, because you are saving yourself a little bit of life this way and maintaining this card that acts as a sort of hate card for so many of Bonde's tools.
Yeah. And the fact that Bonde is using the claim here, I think maybe suggests to Paolo that there is a Sacrifice outlet to follow it up with. And with that Witch's Oven, you wonder if Bonde had deployed that first, then with the claim...
All right, but wait.
Okay.
So, we're not bouncing this Scavenging Ooze, because now, if Bonde uses a Sacrifice outlet on this Ooze, and then Paolo gets a way to use this Scorching Dragonfire. That's 5 cards for Uro.
Yeah, and there is another Claim the Firstborn in reserve to handle that, potentially. And Rotting Regisaur comes back down. So that Claim the Firstborn is going to end up being just a 2 damage, essentially.
And that's gotta be a
Brazen Borrower as a 3-1 coming in.
We're getting close. This growth spiral is going to put Paulo one step closer to bringing back this Uro.
He did actually need that additional blue source to do it, and he hit with the Steam Pin, so Uro can also come back down on this turn.
I think he's still 1 card short at this point, just because that Ooze didn't get sacrificed and Scorching Dragonfire didn't get cast. It's close.
The Flyers come in, and those are a substantial clock by themselves. But are now down just to 10 life. And with Reclamation Mana, we can feast on some cards here, get it all back at the end of the turn.
Look, in nature, not a single bone or scrap of flesh goes to waste.
I'm assuming that is a flavor text and not just a witticism.
Yeah, no, it is. Well, at least of the Commander one. I played Legacy Elves back in the day and have just had the same Scavenging Oozes for 10 years now. So
that's not just the kind of thing that you say on the regular.
Oh, well, maybe I've just been watching a lot of Hannibal and like to have these strange musings to myself every now and again.
Very deep, very philosophical. So now, Rotting Regisaur has to discard something. All good options here for Michael Bonde. He draws a Cauldron Familiar just after discarding the Witch's Oven. Not the way you typically draw that one up.
Well, in the face of a Scavenging Ooze, you can see what got him here.
Oh, absolutely. And he still has a Sacrifice Outlet in the Rogue Strider to pair with that Claim the Firstborn.
Mm-hmm.
But Noxious Grasp is the play here on Scavenging Ooze.
And this is interesting. We can see Bonde working very hard to navigate to a situation where this Claim the Firstborn is going to be worth so much when it hits an Uro.
And we see the Uro there face up in Paolo's graveyard. Bonde trying to bait him into using that, setting up this one-turn kill with a surprise second copy of Claim the Firstborn. Temple of Mystery, allowing Paolo to scry first, and that Brazen Borrower is the big deal. If that Uro now switches sides, Petty Theft can interfere with that in a big way.
That's incredible, and you can see Paulo holding the shark back, paying respect to something like that, realizing that Bonde is not the kind of person to just cast a Claim the Firstborn without a Sacrifice Outlet for just 2 damage on a Scavenging Ooze on turn 3, right? No one's building a shock to the face on turn 3.
And Uro gaining what could be 3 crucial life. Bonde has to pitch another card into the more of that Rotting Regisaur. And here is Claim the Firstborn attempted on the Uro. And the sequencing here is a tough decision, because if you lead with Roast Rider and then try Claim the Firstborn, the Roast Rider can get removed in response and then you're out of luck. But if you go for Claim the Firstborn first and then go for Roast Rider, then that also is open up to something like Petty Theft, but just in a different way.
How absurd is it? It looks like Paulo might just be a turn shy of winning this game if Bonde just has this Rotting Regisaur.
Or a second Rotting Regisaur. No Sacrifice Outlet needed here, with that second 3-1 coming down for Paolo. And now that is 14 damage staring Paolo in the face just from those Regisaurs alone. We'll need to find something here.
Oh my god.
Passages
doesn't count.
No.
I think that Bonde has just created a game where he rode these Rotting Regisaurs to victory.
Yeah, that second Regisaur, the perfect draw here, the only thing that could create this much damage, or the potential for it, on this next turn.
And this was the risk of bouncing Uro over the Rotting Regisaur that Bonde already had on the battlefield, is now You don't have this blocker. Paulo doesn't have anything to step in front of these rotting registers.